before Seraphina Vale understood the meaning of loyalty, betrayal, or sacrifice. Her future had already been decided by a promise she never made. To the outside world, it looked like an unusual agreement between two powerful families. But hidden beneath that arrangement was a truth far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. Her father had not promised her to the Mafia because of tradition or ambition. He had done it because he was running from a secret that had the power to destroy everything he built. Seraphina spent most of her life believing she had grown up in a protected world. She knew her father, Alexander Vale, as a successful businessman who provided everything she needed. He was respected by society, admired by wealthy circles, and known as a man who always remained calm under pressure. But behind his polished reputation was a history connected to one of America's most powerful mafia networks. Damien had spent years hiding the darker parts of his past. He carefully controlled what Seraphina learned, who she met, and which questions she was allowed to ask. Whenever her childhood came up, he avoided details that seemed harmless but carried hidden weight. He believed silence was the only way to keep his daughter safe. The truth was that years earlier, Damien had made a promise to the Voss family. That promise connected Seraphina's future to Alexander Voss, the man who would eventually become one of the most feared mafia leaders in the country. The agreement was not built on romance, respect, or family tradition. It was created after a dangerous event that changed the balance of power between two worlds. Alexander Voss grew up surrounded by power, betrayal, and violence. He became known as a strategic thinker who could destroy enemies without hesitation. Many believed he accepted the arrangement because it strengthened his empire. However, Alexander carried his own unanswered questions about the agreement and the events that created it. As Seraphina's wedding approached, strange details from her childhood began resurfacing. Old records disappeared. Certain names were removed from family documents. People who once knew Damien's secrets suddenly became afraid to speak. It became clear that someone had worked for years to erase a part of Seraphina's history. The most unsettling discovery was that powerful people were not afraid of Seraphina because of who she was. They were afraid because of what she might remember. While Seraphina prepared to enter a world she never chose, Alexander began secretly investigating the forgotten pieces of her past. He searched through old records, hidden connections, and buried family secrets, expecting to find a simple explanation behind the childhood promise. Instead, he uncovered something that changed everything. Alexander discovered that Seraphina was never promised to him because of an alliance. She was promised because she was the only person who could reveal the truth behind a crime that changed the Mafia forever. The discovery Alexander Voss made before the wedding changed the meaning of the entire arrangement. What appeared to be a marriage between two powerful families was actually the beginning of a dangerous search for the truth. As Seraphina Vale arrived at the Voss estate, she believed she was walking toward a future chosen by others. She did not realize she was entering a world where every person around her was protecting a secret. The wedding took place at a grand wooden estate, hidden deep within snow-covered mountains. The location was breathtaking, surrounded by endless forests and untouched white landscapes. Yet beneath its beauty was an atmosphere of tension. The isolated property was not chosen for romance or celebration. It was chosen because secrets survived better in places where no one could easily reach them. As Seraphina stepped into the Mafia world, she immediately sensed that something was wrong. The guests were dressed in luxury, but their expressions carried suspicion rather than happiness. Powerful figures watched her movements carefully, as if they were waiting for her to remember something she had forgotten. She was no longer simply a bride entering a wealthy family. She was a person connected to a mystery that frightened people who had spent their lives controlling fear. For the first time, Seraphina began questioning everything she had believed about her father. Alexander Vale had always told her that he kept her away from danger because he loved her. But standing among people who knew parts of her history she did not, she started wondering whether his protection had also been a form of control. The hardest truth to accept was that a person could hide a secret for love and still cause pain through that silence. While everyone focused on the wedding ceremony, Alexander Voss had a different purpose. He was not interested in simply completing an old agreement. He wanted answers. The gathering brought together powerful members of both families, including people who had been connected to the mysterious events of the past. Alexander believed the person responsible for hiding the truth was somewhere inside that room. Among the guests were aging Mafia leaders, trusted advisors, and relatives who carried influence within the organization. Some appeared loyal, while others carefully avoided certain conversations. They all knew more about Seraphina's childhood than she did, and that made every interaction feel like a hidden battle. As the ceremony moved closer, tension increased. A secret message was discovered among the wedding preparations, warning Alexander that someone inside his own circle was watching his investigation. The message proved that the danger was not outside the estate. It was already standing among them. Seraphina, determined to understand why her life had been controlled by a promise she never agreed to, searched through the estate's forgotten rooms. Behind an old wooden panel, she discovered a hidden file containing documents her father had tried to keep buried. Inside was proof that changed everything. Seraphina realized her father was not protecting the Mafia from her. He had been protecting her from the Mafia. The hidden file inside the estate changed everything Seraphina Vale thought she knew about her life. The marriage she believed was a punishment became something far more complicated. She was not simply a daughter trapped by her father's decision. She was connected to a forgotten crime that powerful people had spent years trying to erase. For most of her life, Seraphina believed her childhood was ordinary. She remembered quiet moments with her father, expensive homes, and a life carefully protected from danger. But the truth hidden beneath those memories was far darker. As a child, she had been present during an event that changed the relationship between two powerful Mafia families. She had seen something she was never supposed to see. The details of that night had been buried deep. Her memories were incomplete, not because she forgot naturally, but because people around her worked to make sure she never searched for answers. Certain moments from her childhood had been carefully removed from conversations, family records, and even photographs. The reason was simple. The truth could destroy people who had spent decades building their power. Years earlier, a betrayal inside the Mafia organization had caused a chain of events that damaged both the Vale and Voss families. Someone close to the inner circle had broken trust, leading to a disappearance that was never officially explained. Rumors spread, accusations grew, and two powerful families became trapped in a cycle of suspicion. But the one person who could reveal what truly happened had been kept away from the truth. Seraphina. The discovery forced her to confront the most painful question of her life. How many people had lied to her while claiming they were protecting her? Her father's silence no longer felt like protection. It felt like another secret she had to carry. The people she trusted most had made decisions about her future, her memories, and her identity without allowing her to choose for herself. Yet Alexander Voss began seeing the situation differently. While others viewed Seraphina as a threat because of what she might know, Alexander started searching for evidence that connected the past to the present. He investigated old records, questioned forgotten alliances, and followed clues that had been ignored for years. The more he discovered, the clearer one truth became. Seraphina was not responsible for the conflict. She was the person caught in the middle of it. Someone had turned her into a hidden piece of a much larger game. But the closer Seraphina and Alexander moved toward the truth, the more dangerous their search became. People who had remained silent for decades began taking action. Evidence disappeared. Old allies changed sides. Every answer uncovered another question. Someone was desperate to keep Seraphina's memories buried forever. Searching through another collection of her father's hidden belongings, Seraphina discovered a small recording device from her childhood. With trembling hands, she uncovered a message that had been hidden away for years. The recording revealed something impossible to ignore. Her father was not the person who created the secret. He was trying to protect her from the person who did. The recording from Seraphina's childhood changed the way Alexander Voss viewed the entire situation. For years, He believed the agreement between the Vale and Voss families was connected to power, loyalty, and survival. But now he understood that the marriage was only a small part of a much deeper mystery. The world knew Alexander as a ruthless mafia leader who built his empire through strategy and fear. His name carried enough power to silence enemies and command respect. Many believed he accepted the marriage because it gave him control over another influential family. But the truth was different. Alexander had inherited more than a powerful organization. He had inherited unanswered questions, hidden betrayals, and a family history filled with secrets. Since taking control of the Voss Empire, he had searched for the truth behind a mysterious event that damaged his family's reputation and changed the balance of power in the Mafia world. The discovery of Seraphina's connection to that event gave him the missing piece he had been searching for. However, finding the truth came with a dangerous price. If Alexander exposed everything, he would not only destroy his enemies, he would also damage the image of his own family and reveal mistakes made by the people who came before him. For the first time, Alexander faced a choice between protecting his family's legacy and protecting the truth. Choosing Seraphina meant challenging powerful people who had supported his rise. It meant questioning the same individuals who had helped build the empire he now controlled. Instead of treating Seraphina as a responsibility forced upon him, Alexander began seeing her as the person who deserved answers more than anyone else. She had spent her entire life living inside a story written by others. Now, for the first time, she had the chance to understand her own past. Their relationship slowly changed as they searched for the truth together. Fear was replaced by trust, and suspicion was replaced by a shared purpose. They were no longer a bride and groom connected by an old promise. They became partners fighting against the people who had manipulated their lives. As they followed the hidden clues, they discovered signs of a larger conspiracy. Important documents had been removed from family archives. Secret meetings had taken place between members of both organizations. Certain individuals had benefited from the silence surrounding the old crime. Someone had spent decades making sure the truth never reached the surface. The investigation revealed that the conflict between the Vale and Voss families was not caused by a simple betrayal. It was carefully created by someone who understood how to control powerful people through fear and division. The closer Alexander came to exposing the mastermind, the more dangerous the situation became. Trusted allies began acting differently. Information disappeared before it could be verified. Every step forward created new enemies. Alexander eventually uncovered a hidden connection buried beneath years of lies. The person controlling the conflict had not been hiding from the Mafia world. The person controlling everything had been protected by both families for decades. Alexander's discovery about the hidden mastermind forced the past to finally return to the present. For years, both the Vale and Voss families believed they were victims of each other's actions. But the deeper Alexander and Seraphina searched, the clearer it became that the real damage began with a decision made by one desperate man, Damien Vale. The truth behind Damien's forbidden deal was finally uncovered through the hidden records he left behind. Years earlier, Damien was not simply trying to gain power or protect his reputation. He was trapped between dangerous enemies who wanted control over a secret that could change the future of several powerful families. To save Seraphina from becoming a target, Damien made an agreement with the Voss family. He believed placing her under their protection was the only way to keep her alive. But what he failed to understand was that every secret comes with a price. The agreement that was supposed to protect his daughter became the foundation of years of suspicion, betrayal, and conflict. Damien's biggest mistake was not the promise itself. It was the silence that followed. He erased parts of Seraphina's past, hid important information, and allowed her to believe that she was living a normal life. His intentions may have come from fear, but his choices created the same pain he was trying to prevent. When Seraphina learned the full truth, she felt a deep sense of betrayal. The person she trusted most had controlled her entire future without giving her the chance to understand why. She struggled with the painful reality that someone could love her and still hurt her through their decisions. The hardest truth was realizing that protection without honesty could become another form of imprisonment. Meanwhile, Alexander uncovered the larger conspiracy behind Damien's agreement. The original conflict between the families was never created by one mistake. It was carefully designed by someone who understood how to manipulate fear, loyalty, and revenge. The mastermind had used Damien's desperation and the Voss family's pride to create a conflict that lasted for years. As the truth spread, the fragile balance between the Mafia families began collapsing. Old alliances weakened. Powerful leaders questioned each other's loyalty. The empire that once appeared unstoppable started breaking from within. Everyone wanted revenge, but few understood that revenge was exactly what the hidden enemy wanted. Seraphina realized that the war was not only about her family's past. It was about ending a cycle that had destroyed countless lives. She could no longer remain the person protected by others. She had become the person who had to decide what happened next. Alexander prepared for the coming battle, knowing that exposing the truth would change everything. But before they could reveal the mastermind, one final piece of evidence appeared from Damien's private collection. The discovery was impossible to ignore. Someone from Seraphina's own family had helped create the original Betrayal. The evidence from Damien Vale's private collection shattered the last piece of trust Seraphina had left in her family. She had spent her entire life believing the greatest danger came from the Mafia world outside her home. She feared powerful strangers, criminal alliances, and the dangerous reputation surrounding Alexander Voss. But she never imagined the deepest betrayal would come from someone connected to her own blood. The person who helped create the original conflict was not an enemy from another family. It was someone who understood the Vale legacy, knew Damien's weaknesses, and had access to secrets that were supposed to remain hidden forever. This betrayal changed everything. For Seraphina, the pain was not only about the truth itself. It was about realizing that her entire childhood had been surrounded by people who knew more than they ever told her. Every decision, every warning, and every moment of protection suddenly carried a different meaning. But instead of allowing the betrayal to destroy her, Seraphina began changing. The woman who once searched for answers with fear now searched for them with determination. She stopped seeing herself as a victim of her family's choices and started seeing herself as the person capable of ending the cycle that had controlled generations. She understood something that others had forgotten. Secrets only remain powerful when people are too afraid to reveal them. While Seraphina uncovered the truth about her family, Alexander faced his own battle inside the Voss organization. The discovery threatened the foundation of his empire. Leaders who once followed him began questioning his decisions, and old allies revealed where their loyalty truly belonged. Alexander had always controlled enemies from outside his organization, but now the greatest challenge came from within. The people closest to power were the ones most desperate to protect their secrets. As the old alliances began collapsing, the relationship between the Vale and Voss families changed forever. The hatred that had existed for years started losing its purpose because both sides realized they had been manipulated by the same hidden force. The war they believed they were fighting against each other was actually a war created to keep them divided. Seraphina and Alexander moved closer to exposing the truth, but every step came with greater danger. The mastermind who controlled events for decades was losing control, and desperate people were willing to risk everything to protect the old order. The final confrontation was approaching. Before the truth could be revealed, the enemy finally stepped forward and exposed a secret that changed how Seraphina viewed her father forever. Damien Vale had not been trying to save only his daughter. He had been trying to save both families from complete destruction. For decades, the Mafia world had been built on silence, fear, and carefully protected lies. Families passed down stories that were incomplete. Enemies were created from misunderstandings, and powerful people used old secrets to maintain control. But after years of searching, the truth finally reached the surface, and once it was revealed, there was no way to return to the world that existed before. The complete mystery behind the childhood promise was finally uncovered. Seraphina learned that the original betrayal was not a simple act of revenge between two families. It was a carefully planned manipulation designed to create permanent conflict between the Vale and Voss organizations. The person behind it understood that fear was more powerful than loyalty, and hatred was easier to control than peace. Damien Vale's decision had not started the war. It had been a desperate attempt to survive a war that had already begun. The truth revealed that Damien discovered the conspiracy years earlier, and realized Seraphina had unknowingly become connected to the evidence that could expose everything. He made the painful choice to hide her memories and create the marriage agreement because he believed it was the only way to keep her alive. His methods were wrong, but his purpose was never betrayal. For Seraphina, accepting this truth was not easy. She had spent years believing her father stole her freedom by controlling her future. Now she understood that he had also sacrificed his own happiness while trying to protect her from a danger she could not see. However, understanding his reasons did not erase the pain. Instead, it gave her the strength to create a future different from the one others had planned for her. For the first time, Seraphina stopped allowing the past to define her. She was no longer the daughter trapped inside an old promise. She became the person who decided what that promise would mean. Meanwhile, Alexander Voss faced the most important decision of his life. Tradition demanded that he protect the reputation of his family at any cost. But Alexander chose something more dangerous: the truth. By exposing the hidden betrayal, he weakened the very system that gave him power. He knew the Mafia empire built on fear could not survive forever, and he refused to continue a cycle created by people who were no longer alive to answer for their choices. The mastermind behind the decades-long conflict finally lost control. The secrets that protected their influence became the same secrets that destroyed it. Powerful figures who once seemed untouchable were forced to face the consequences of their actions. Slowly, both families began rebuilding. The old alliances based on fear disappeared, and new relationships were formed through honesty and trust. The war that had divided generations finally began to end. For Seraphina and Alexander, peace seemed closer than ever. But just when everyone believed the darkest chapter was finished, Seraphina received an unexpected message from an unknown source. The message contained only one warning. The biggest secret was not the one they had uncovered. It was the one that had been hidden from Seraphina herself. The mysterious message that reached Seraphina after the fall of the old Mafia order proved that the past was not finished with her. For years, powerful people had tried to control her through secrets, promises, and fear. But they failed to understand one thing: the woman who once needed protection had become the person everyone feared. Seraphina entered the Mafia world as a daughter trapped by a decision made before she could understand it. She arrived surrounded by enemies, hidden motives, and unanswered questions. But after uncovering the truth behind her childhood, she was no longer the girl controlled by an old agreement. She became the person who could decide the future of an entire empire. The final confrontation began when the remaining forces of the old system attempted to reclaim their power. They believed that destroying the evidence and removing those who knew the truth would allow them to rebuild the world they once controlled. But they underestimated Seraphina. She was no longer searching for answers. She was protecting the truth she had fought to uncover. With the evidence gathered from years of investigation, Seraphina and Alexander exposed the final members of the conspiracy. The people who had manipulated both families for decades lost their influence, and the last pieces of the old Mafia structure began collapsing. For Alexander, the victory changed the meaning of leadership. He had inherited a position built on fear, but he chose to create something different. Instead of ruling through intimidation, he focused on loyalty, responsibility, and trust. The empire that once survived through secrets began transforming because two people decided that power without honesty was nothing more than another form of weakness. Seraphina's journey was even more significant. She had once believed her life belonged to the decisions of others. Her father's promise, the Mafia agreement, and the secrets surrounding her childhood had all made her feel powerless. But she discovered that knowing the truth was not a burden. It was strength. She became a symbol of change inside a world that had always resisted it. The same people who once viewed her as a weakness began recognizing her as the person who ended a conflict that had lasted for generations. The future of the Mafia world changed forever. Old traditions disappeared. Families that survived through betrayal were forced to rebuild through trust. The darkness that had controlled generations slowly began fading. Years later, Seraphina and Alexander lived far away from the chaos that once surrounded them. Their peaceful estate rested beside a quiet lake, surrounded by mountains and endless forests. It was a place that represented everything they had fought for, a life chosen by themselves, not controlled by the past. But the past was not completely finished. One evening, while sorting through old family belongings, Seraphina discovered a hidden file from her childhood. Inside was a document that revealed a shocking truth. Someone had been protecting her long before her father ever made the promise.